Hi, Alex Osterbury here, Director of Rugby for Saracens Women. You're listening to the Saracens Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.
The following podcast is brought to you on behalf of the Saracen Supporters Association and is not an official product of Saracens Limited. Content provided voluntarily by our guests and contributors are of their own opinion, which may change over time and should not be taken as fact, particularly as the podcast hosts are regularly talking drivel anyway. If you've got some drivel of your own you'd like to share, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Fezcast_SSA. You can search Facebook for the Fezcast, or you can email fezcast.ssa@outlook.com.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, welcome everybody to the last Fezcast of 2022. In between, what day is it? Is it bin day?
I have no idea. It's another day of sitting around not really getting dressed and eating Quality Street for breakfast. That's about all I can tell you.
Absolutely. Well, that's the voice there of Barry, who hasn't turned his camera on for the reason that he hasn't got dressed and is apparently covered in Quality Street, which is a sight I didn't want to see, particularly as I was drinking roast coffee flavoured rum last night. So, things could be interesting. But it's only you and me who've managed to get out of bed, or potentially the others are still playing with their Christmas presents or whatever. But, we need to have a discussion about, well, we're going to call this show The Nightmare Before Christmas, because London Irish last Friday, it didn't happen, did it really? Is it just a bad dream, Barry?
It was it was an absolute nightmare. I mean, we're going to have to mention the ref, aren't we? And we're going to think we're all going to think we got shortchanged off of Sir. But at the end of the day, we just didn't play very well. The line out didn't function. It didn't obviously help having Wolfie nearly decapitated. I'm glad to see that he mentioned on Twitter that he's okay and he's fine after that, because it didn't look very good for him at one point. But the forwards couldn't get across the gain line. We couldn't, with a two-man advantage, we couldn't flip in score. We didn't get any 50-50, 60-40. We didn't even get any 70-30 decisions, I don't think, off of the officiating team. It was a total disaster. And then, as I mentioned to you just off air there, my train broke down on the way home and it took us an extra hour to get back.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll go into that in a bit more in depth in a moment. But also, we're going to have a quick look back over 2022 and put out a couple of highlights for us both from the last year. And then we're going to look forward with a little bit of trepidation, I think, given the walking dead that we appear to be carrying at the moment, to Chiefs on Saturday, isn't it, the 31st? So let's go back and let's get London Irish out of the way. And I will say, Barry, first of all, kudos to London Irish. I've said this season all along, looking at the other teams in the league, they've been in somewhat of a false position. They're extremely well coached. Les Kiss and Declan Kidney know what they're doing, number one. Number two, they've got some cracking young players. And just throwing one name out there, Ollie Hassel-Collins, I thought, he scored the first try. He looked extremely frightening, difficult to handle the whole game through. He was a top quality player. And I think this is a performance from Irish that's been coming for a little while.
Yeah, I probably wasn't very fair whinging about us, but you're right. Irish were determined. They were well organised. They kept us away from that gain line. They kept us going backwards. They made us panic and do silly things, and they were brilliant. Hassel-Collins is live. He is absolutely frightening. The speed on that man is incredible. I mean, I didn't even. Who's one Irish player I've always secretly admired, Yancey van Rensburg, and I barely noticed him, but he would have had another effective game. Paddy Jackson, for all the furor about him, he manages the game well and he keeps himself in check. And I don't think he missed a kick, did he? I don't remember him missing one. No. Even the one that Mr. Carley said, go on then from the halfway line, just for a bit of fun at the end of the first half. But no, it was Irish were brilliant, and they've lost a lot of games this season by very small margins. And if they turn 2 or 3 of those losses into wins, they'd be halfway up the table, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the one thing that we do have to talk about, though, is the red cards in the game. They did actually affect the game hugely. First red card, Coleman, he's got issues. That's his third red in 3 games against Saracens. He either doesn't like Saracens players and wants to take their heads off, or he does have a distinct issue with tackling. Now, it does, I suppose, as they point out, it doesn't help if you're 7'3". It's very difficult to get low, but he doesn't seem to be making the effort to get low. And, as you said at the start there, Barry, at one point it looked like Wolfie, was going to be a headless man for the rest of his life. I mean, it did look really, really serious. So you could see the looks on Saracens players' faces that they were seriously worried about Wolfie. And, thank heavens he's tweeted to say he's all right. I mean, whether he's going to be back for games soon, nobody knows yet. But, yeah, Coleman's got an issue there and that needs dealing with. And, seeing as that's his third red card for the same offence, I can imagine it's going to be a long ban for him, and which he should spend hitting tackle bags low.
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully the Biscuit Committee will take into account the fact that it's his third one against us. I mean, he's probably got an exemplary disciplinary record against everyone else, but yeah, you're right. Either he's been incredibly unfortunate or he's got an issue with us. But that was an awful tackle. No one around us. I was talking to some Irish fans at halftime, and we were talking about high tackles, strangely enough, and no one on their side was even questioning the decision to send him off. We had some chats about R1 and obviously their Augustine Creevy one from a couple of games ago, but no question about that. That was 100% a red.
Well, you mentioned R1. We have to point out Ben Earl's first red, which, first off, really disappointing given that the New England coach was in the crowd watching a game in which Ben obviously would want to impress, and maybe that's got something to do with how he went into that particular contact. At the time, I was screaming blue murder. I didn't feel at the time, watching at the time, I felt there was enough mitigation given the speed of what happened, given how the player entered the situation, and given the height of Ben Earl, that if it had been a yellow, I don't think anybody would have complained. But by the letter of the law, it was a red. So, and likewise, nobody complained too much on the pitch. We accepted it. We got on with it. And I mean, Owen Farrell was getting rounds of rubbish over internet again, saying, well, he was speaking as a ref. Well, no, all he did was went up to him, asked for a confirmation, nodded his head, agreed, and got on with the game. But yeah, we can't argue with that one, can we, Barry?
Live, I thought it was barely a yellow, to be quite honest with you. I've not had the benefit of seeing it back on telly other than on the giant screen at the GTEC community stadium. But I felt hard done by at the time. But at the end of the day, without the benefit of being able to see it a couple of times close up, and without the benefit of listening in on the referee's conversation on it, then you just have to take it. You did kind of feel that, having sent their guy off early, you felt that he was almost itching to even it up a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you slightly there, for certain. As I said, at the time, with a few Guinnesses inside me, sat at home, the ire was high in my viewpoint. Sitting back, reflecting, slightly more sober, shall we say. Yeah, I can see it was a red. I don't have too many concerns with it. And as I say, if it had been a yellow, I don't think anybody else would have had too many concerns with it. But it's a red, it's a red. And hopefully, the disciplinary committee will take into account first offence, normally exemplary tackling technique. The mitigation there was, all the different things that we say. It wasn't a deliberate attempt to take the lad's head off. It was an accident of a number of circumstances that took place there. So, that's life, I suppose. Which brings us on to the third red, which wasn't given, which for me was as clear-cut as Coleman's with Jennings. Now, Jennings was lucky to be on the field in the first place. and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But his hit on Billy Vunipola, there was no attempt to wrap. It was bent legs and then extended into the chin of Billy Vunipola with the shoulder. That was as clear a red as could be. So why Carly and the refereeing team mitigated that down to a yellow, I have absolutely no idea whatsoever.
You can only assume that's one of those where they've gone, well, look, if we give another red, then we're kind of going down the route of deciding this match, and let's try and find a reason not to. You could say there were comparisons, if you like, with the final last year when there was a couple of yellows that could easily have been reds, but you kind of thought that in that case, the occasion, the fact it was the final, you got Wayne Barnes, wasn't it, saying, do I want to be deciding a final this early on in the game, and then having given one, he's got to be consistent. And I suspect it was just a case of that. They were probably desperate to find some form of mitigation and not do it. But yeah, it that didn't look good. And there was a couple of people around me were certainly surprised it wasn't another red.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe it. And also, this leads us on to the refereeing of the game, which, let's be kind, it is Christmas after all, to Mr. Carly, and say it wasn't his best game. And I think the problem with Mr. Carly at the moment is that he's been getting a bit of grief because of his refereeing, and because of that, I think he's going out and trying to impose himself on the game and show that I am the referee. Now, that come down definitely when you looked at the way that he was having conversations with players on the field. Now, it was more apparent that it was Saracens players he was having conversations with, because Saracens appeared to be on, as you said earlier, Barry, we didn't even get the 70-30s, let alone the 50-50s in our way. So therefore, he was having conversations with Owen Fowler and senior players. Mako Vunipola is unable not to have a chirp at times. That's just him. And sometimes he gets away with it because he is a bit of a cheeky chappy sort of thing. But sometimes if it's like Matt Carly, he was just determined to impose himself upon that game and say, I am the ref, which doesn't equate to refereeing the game well. And I think the bit where he walked us back 20 yards, do you remember when Luke Pearce did it? Was it against Chiefs last season?
It was.
Where he walked us back because Billy Vunipola had chirped off at him. And afterwards, Luke Pearce turned around and said, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just stopped after the 10 and said, right, enough. Stop the game. Captain, to me, this stops here. All he did there was inflame the situation even more and create a greater sense of injustice to the Saracens players. Now, yes, Saracens players shouldn't react to that level of injustice, and I'll come on to that a bit later on in this little discussion. But it's another one of those situations where the way that Matt Carly refereed that game, I felt it became almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that he was going to lose a bit of control of the game. Okay. And if you are turning around and saying, did we get the 70-30s? Well, in a lot of cases, I think the evidence is there. There was the one, the 50-22. Yes, it was close, but not even go and have a look on the cameras and say, let's have a look. Let's make sure it hasn't gone. Because, well, you messaged on WhatsApp. You were right in line with it, weren't you?
I was still cheering for the 70-30, and then I saw where the assistant referee had stopped, and I was absolutely flabbergasted because he was about 5 yards from where the ball clearly went out. And if they'd had a look at that on the cameras, they must have seen it, because it was as clear as the nose on your face that was 50-22. Having said that, you were quite right to point out in WhatsApp that it wouldn't have done us any good because we'd have just thrown it to them anyway.
Well, that is another problem, and we'll come on to that in a slight minute. But and I am going to mention Pifatelli now at KP now, because the one thing that really annoyed me more than anything else and showed to me how badly it was refereed was when Carly gave a penalty after KP had scored the try. The KP saying something. He described it as screaming in the face. He looks on the camera when they showed the the replay of it. He wasn't. He said something to a player. Now, what happened there was, as I could see, is that KP scored the try. Two players are coming from the Irish, and something has happened on the floor. Whether that's somebody said something to KP or whether somebody's put a dig in or done something a bit nefarious on the floor, but KP got up a bit pissed off and said something. Whatever he said then caused Jennings, who shouldn't have been on the, this is the first time he should have red card. He come running in and threw a punch. And nothing got said about that. So my viewpoint, what should have happened there was that Carly should have turned around and said, well, obviously something's happened on the floor. KP, you can't react to it, don't. But Jennings, and that's, okay, if I want to give a penalty, I'll give a penalty. But I'll reverse it because Jennings has come in the third man and he's thrown one. The fact he missed is neither here nor there. But he'd got it in his head, Carly, that he was going to penalise us for something there. And it just, if referees are going to start penalising players for saying something as they go over the line scoring tries, then we'll be restarting every game after a try with a penalty for the defending side, because it happens all the time. That was a ridiculous decision and just showed how far Carly had lost control of the game, in my view.
Reminiscent of JP Doyle a number of years ago when he had a go at Saracens for running in and celebrating winning a breakdown penalty or something, I think it was. And he's like, but every club does it. They're still doing it now. Why are you getting so upset that our players run in and celebrate? It's bizarre, but obviously, as we said, we always watch these things with a parochial eye, and we're always going to think we are done by, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And again, I mean, it does bring it on to the last part of this discussion. In as much as what we've said that, without taking anything away from Irish, he performed brilliantly, without using the injustices, shall we say, of what we felt the referee performed, at the end of the day, our performance was poor, very poor. And I think Mark McCall referred to that in his post-match interviews. I'm sure that the lads will understand that performance was poor. But also, I think it's a performance that has been incoming for a number of weeks now, Barry. I mean, we go back, the great escape against Northampton, the games where we've been 12, 15 points down against Edinburgh in Europe. We were lucky to get the win there. This loss has been coming for a little while, and we've been sat here 9 out of 9, 11 games won in all competitions. All things are rosy. We've been as guilty of it as anything. We said to Kelly Brown, are we expecting something special? Can we look at it? The old 147 breaks coming up. Well, we've just missed the black off the spot there, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we weren't going to win that game, however it was refereed, because we were simply, as we said earlier, we couldn't get across the game line. We couldn't get front football, which really nullifies Van Zyl and his speed at the ruck, because the defence is set, and it doesn't matter how quick you are, they're always going to close you down on the next phase as well. We couldn't throw into a line out, and we could barely win a scrum all game. And to not get anything with a 2-man advantage really just about summed up our night. And yeah, you're right. It's been coming. There's been some games that we've won where we could quite easily have lost. We've thrown Northampton into that mix as well, which wasn't that long ago. Even Lyon, we were far from convincing. And although we'll come on to injuries and what have you in the third part of the show, I believe we're clearly missing a couple of players out there on the line out, and it wasn't good on Friday. It was definitely a nightmarish game for us.
Well, indeed. Well, let's talk about the line out very quickly. First of all, I mean, KP, the hookers do get an awful lot of grief. They're the ones that are highlighted. But what you've also got to bear in mind, I think, is that Nick Ezekwe first came back since June, and he was leading the line out, and that's an impossible position to put somebody in. Theo McFarland, who's out now, it appears for the rest of the season with an ACL, which we will discuss in the third part. Again, is a huge loss. He's been called in lineouts all season, as has Maro Itoje when he's been there. Those two players not there. You're suddenly putting a lot of pressure on Hugh Tizard, who's new to the club, and Nick Ezekwe, who's coming back from a long-term injury, to call those lineouts. And that's where it went wrong. And, as much as KP's the one who's going to get the grief, what he was throwing to, Irish had sorted them out, worked out what was going on, and there was nothing they could do to change it. That's the number one issue. Number two issue with the line-out is you got Kitchener on the bench, and he was never used, which did surprise me somewhat. Now, okay, Bennell going off, Jackson Ray's are more like for like. Yeah, you push Andy Christie into the second row as an emergency. But when the line-out was going that badly wrong, I'm not sure why Kitchener didn't come on earlier. But, that's the way it goes. But the biggest problem for me was when we were two men up on the pitch. There seems to be, I'm loath to call it arrogance or overconfidence, but the one thing you'll know, Barry, from listening to the Fezcast before you joined us and now you joined us, the one thing I hate in coaching is when people have a plan A and their only change is do plan A better. And for me, when Irish went down to 12 players, what Saracens tried to do was just do plan A with the almost, again, I'm not going to say arrogant, but, it was the old thing about the definition of madness is trying to do the same thing time and time again, expecting a different outcome. Irish had it sorted. They just went tight on defence, and we never tried anything. We didn't try a chip over the top. We didn't try a little grubber kick. Elliot Daly's been putting in little kicks here, there, and everywhere all season that have worked, and we never tried it once. I don't think when we were down, when we had two men up.
No, I can't remember any little kicks going through. But I mean, with a two-man advantage, you don't need to do too much more than just work the ball from side to side and wait, because you're going to get an opening eventually. But we kept going one out runners. We kept keeping it. We allowed them to keep it tight. And for all the credit we're giving Irish, we did play into their game plan, if you like, the whole game, not just the advantage. But you're right. I don't think it's a question of arrogance or anything. I think it's a case of we've got away with it a few times this season just by literally keeping the faith, as it were, with the plan and waiting for it to come good. And I think that was probably what we did last Friday as well. And finally, it's caught up with us. Hopefully, we'll have some changes for the well, we're definitely going to have some changes in personnel, but hopefully, we'll have some changes in tactics for the Exeter game. And the Gloucester away after that, isn't it? So it just doesn't get any easier. But
doesn't worry.
But we'll have to push on with it, and hopefully, we either win or we learn. So we didn't win, so let's hope we've learned the lessons from last week.
Well, absolutely. Well, that's a good point to stop this one. So let's have a word from one of our advertisers, and then we'll come back and have a bit of a look back at 2022. Just put out a couple of highlights for each of us, and then we'll look forward to Exeter Chiefs after that. So we'll be back in a moment.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracen Supporters Association. And I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, welcome back to part two of our end of year Fezcast with me, Jez and Barry, and we're going to have a quick discussion about the year that was and some highlights. We've done the bad from the weekends. Let's do some good over the year, and I'm going to bring in three highlights for this. Two Saracens and one for the wider game. I'll start with a wider game. Eddie Jones has been sacked. Yay! I'm happy. Other than the fact that there won't be a Jez rant about Eddie Jones potentially in the future. But yeah, I'm happy to see a new coach in England rugby, and hopefully, we can have a. Well, I think initially what will happen is what Steve Borthwick did at Leicester is just go back to basics. It may well be that the next World Cup will be a lot of the dad's armies. Ben Youngs has probably extended his career. Owen Farrell maybe back at 10. There'll be a few Courtney Laws maybe, some of the older boys coming back in because he's got a free pass. And then we'll see how he's going to develop those young players, the JVPs, the Ollie Hassel-Collins, the Harry Arundels, etc., and see how they go. So that's number one. Number two, one of the old boys at Saracens, for me, a huge highlight was seeing Alex Good break Chris Chesney's record. A brilliant day at StoneX. I watched on the telly. You guys were there with Chris Chesney and Francois Pienaar, seemingly drinking the Schalkberger dry of his Reds, and all the other old boys that were there, the Philippe Sellers, the Michael Liners, whatever. But then my big highlight is a new player, and it's Magic Theo, isn't it? I mean, his emergence as a world-class talent, a raw world-class talent, albeit, but one-handed takes at line-outs, leaping like Olympic salmons to take high balls here, there and everywhere. The bloke's just infused me hugely. And as I said at the time, I think last season, or last year, I haven't been this excited about a player bursting onto the scene since Jonah Lumo in the mid-90s.
Great player. I mean, massive kudos to Nick Kennedy for identifying the talent there. I mean, I think he played some rugby before he came to us, but there wasn't an awful lot of it. So yeah, great work by Kennedy and all the coaches to bring out the best in him. And devastating as we found out the beginning of this weekend that he is out for the rest of the season by the looks of it, barring some sort of divine intervention, which would be quite handy. But I'm sure he'll come back rested and ready to go again next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he has become such an important part. As we said in the part one, his leadership at the line-out for such an inexperienced player has been exemplary as well, and it's doing the nuts and bolts as well as the expansive, brilliant stuff. You've got to be able to do both sides of the game. And he certainly does that. And I know Matt has made the point that sometimes he has quiet games. Well, unless you're Richard Hill, who never had a bad game, I mean, it's very difficult not to have moments when you are a bit quieter, particularly if you've set your standards so high. But yeah, let's hope he comes back from this ACL injury stronger, faster, fitter, cleverer, whatever, and that he truly does kick on and become a great player. So for you, Barry, what have been your highlights?
Oh, there's been so many. Off the pitch at the StoneX, it's probably got to be the opening of the West Ham, which is incredible. I actually bought my first season tickets the night or the day after they announced they were going to redevelop the West Ham, because at that point it was not difficult to get match day tickets, but it wasn't that easy. And I thought, oh crikey, when they do that, I'll never get a ticket because they'll have a reduced capacity. But bought my season tickets and I've had one ever since. But it's great to see it open. I mean, it's impressive, and it takes your breath away as you walk up to, if you come up to the StoneX from that side, from the Champions Way side, then it's the first thing you see of the ground, and it's a really impressive piece of work by the club. And obviously they're at Middlesex University as well. And it's just great to see that they've managed to do that. Let's hope that there was mention of a unitary plan a while back that kind of moved the athletics track, or at least had an alternate athletics track on the site. Let's hope that gets reinstated and we can do something with the temporary stands as well. That would be great. But that, I mean, that means that we are staying there long term, which is obviously good news. Good news for the club, and we've seen the instability around other clubs this season, which is definitely not been a highlight. So long may that continue from strength to strength. I'm going to pick up on a Fezcast highlight as well, really? Although I wasn't involved in it, so boo sucks. But it was the Lucy Ray interview. To get the the chief executive of the club on here, or chairman. I don't know what her official title is, actually. I kind of lose track of who's got what name on the door. But to get her on here, and we are quite a small niche, if you like, production. We certainly don't get the numbers of some of the other general rugby podcasts. But to get her on here was an absolute masterclass, and to get some clear, concise answers. I mean, she's very, very good. She does regular updates to the fans. There was one just Saturday, I think, out by email, and she's very good with communication, and she's really carrying on the legacy, if you like, of her father, and clearly, again, the club is in safe hands. And then, if you want one that's on the pitch, it had to be that semi-final against Harlequins, when Harlequins are out the blocks like Usain Bolt, and we seemed to be struggling to get any sort of purchase in the game. We were 2 tries down very, very quickly. Marcus Smith's hitch kick seemed to be working for him, and we were outnumbered in the stands as well, because there were Harlequins fans absolutely blooming everywhere, having done what they call a Munster, which is basically they booked tickets before they'd even qualified for the game, just so they could get them. I gather from talking to some of them after the game. But the way we fought back, and I think we had 3 yellow cards in that game, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And we did to them what Irish did to us on Friday, and we just didn't let them anywhere near us until it was epidemic, Rodney, as Del Boy would say, because we'd already won the game by then, and we were so good that day. And you can blame me for the final, because I remember talking to a Leicester Tigers fan after the match, bizarrely, because I saw this fella wandering past in a Leicester shirt, and I said, "Are you lost, mate?" And I said, "Well, I enjoyed that immensely." I said, "I just hope we haven't punched ourselves out before the final next week." And hey ho, look what happened.
Well, absolutely, and yeah, you're right. I mean, that was a huge highlight. That was pretty rapidly punctured the week after. Just going back to Lucy Ray as well, from my point of view, it's a highlight in knowing so. And, we've seen this week, the Daily Telegraph was putting out a big thing about the accumulated debt amongst all the remaining clubs in Premier Rugby. And yes, there is a huge problem that potentially could cause huge issues in the future. But, Lucy came on, was most honest about the situation, didn't seek to hide the fact that there is a lot of debt, but also was very honest and open about what they put in place to get that debt back and to become sufficient, whilst improving the ground, as you say, whilst improving the match day experience, whilst also improving sustainability, environmental impacts, all of these different things. It's all part, it's not just what happens on the pitch for 80 minutes every other Saturday. It's the whole thing around it, and the inclusion of the Saracens women, the inclusion of Saracens Mavericks in that family as well, and the youth and whatever. It was brilliant. And I'd like to say, highlights of the year were all the guests that we've had on, Marley Packer, and all the other girls, and George Evans, and all the girls from Saracens Women who've been on, Kelly Brown, that we've spoken to from the club, and obviously Christian Judge, Ben Earl's been on. So many different people, too many to mention, but everybody who's been on from the club. And we do thank Ollie and Harry for all of their help in getting those guys on. It's been a great year. And also, obviously, the 4 guys who joined me and Matt, yourself, Joe, Sam and John, you've added something to the Fezcast that has been absolutely brilliant, and we thank you for that as well.
Yeah, excellent. It's been good fun to do. I have to say my travelling companion to Saracens has an awfully embarrassing habit occasionally of meeting people that he knows at games in the pubs or whatever, and introducing me as that bloke off the Fezcast. And it finally caught on Friday night, because someone said, "Oh, well, I listened to that." He said, "That Jez, he sounds angry."
Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, it's quarter to 10 in the morning, so I haven't had a Guinness yet or anything. So, I'm reason to be cheerful now. Let's finish this bit. Have another word from one of our advertisers, and then we'll come back and have a quick look at the field hospital that is the Saracens training ground this week, and look forward to Chiefs on Saturday.
This is the Fezcast.
Hi, I'm Alex Lewington, and I'm a Looseheads ambassador.
I'm Sydney Gregson, and I'm a Looseheads ambassador.
Our aim is to tackle the stigma of mental health in rugby and society in general.
The Looseheads mission is to place a mental health lead at every rugby club. Get in touch now to find out more.
You can find us at Looseheads on all social media channels or at looseheads.co.uk.
Take care and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Enjoy the rest of the pod.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, welcome back to the Fezcast and the last part of our last show of 2022. Injuries. I described it as a field hospital, and we've already discussed Theo McFarland looks like out for the rest of the season with an anterior cruciate ligament injury sustained in training. Not great news. The other player, Duncan Taylor, on the bench. Great to see Duncan back, and then he pulls up with a tight hamstring. Hopefully that's not too much of a problem. Jamie George missing. Well, we know we've got problems at hooker because Wolfie went off on Friday, and presumably he's going to be out, stood down for a concussion maybe. Who knows? See how he goes there. But, I mean, they're dropping like flies at the moment, Barry, aren't they? You've got the injury update there. Come on, give us the bad news.
Well, the line-out's looking a little bit tricky, as you say, because we've got no Theo, we've got no Callum Hunter-Hill for 3 to 4 months, which means he'll be back more or less in time for the playoffs, I guess, pretty much, if that. We don't know if Jamie was an injury or whether he was just rested. There's no... If he was concussed, and he certainly looked it from where I was sat, we won't be seeing Wolfie on the 31st against Exeter, which would be a great shame, because if Jamie's not playing, I'm always delighted to see Wolfie, because he generally chips in with a try, and he's pretty good with the line outs. It wasn't all KP's fault on Friday, as you've said. There's so many moving parts to a line out. There's so many bits to break, but there is some good news. Ben Harris, Don Morris, who I'd forgotten about, actually completely forgotten about the lad, and not realised I'd not seen him this year. And Rossi Shegan are back in full training, so they'll hopefully be coming back soon. Manu Vunipola as well is now back in training, so that's a little bit of cover there. A little bit disappointing to see Ralph Adams-Hales still struggling, and no timeline put on his recovery. We wish all the injured players well, but particularly Ralph, because he really can't catch a break with anything injury-wise. Just got back from that awful injury at Gloucester, and he picked up another one on his first game back, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
I mean, if he didn't have bad luck, he'd have no luck at all, would he? I mean.
Good song, that.
Yeah, he really is. And you feel for him in the same way as you feel for Duncan Taylor. He seems to get back and then get injured, and some players it happens to, unfortunately. And, how do you change that? I think a lot of the time also it becomes mental with them as well, that, if you are getting injuries, there's part of your psyche that makes you more prevalent to injuries. And I'm sure those players appreciate that and do everything they can. But yeah, we really are struggling. So, going into Exeter Chiefs, we beat them down at Sandy Park, which was a great day out. Again, another last minute win thanks to Faz's boot. A game that we could and probably should have lost as well, quite possibly. It was worth it just to see Tony Rowe's face at the end of that game. But Yeah, Chiefs are looking good. They suddenly seem to have turned a bit of a corner. A lot to do with a few internationals such as Henry Slade and Luke Cowan-Dickey and Jack Noel coming back, and particularly players there at Chiefs, I think, who are looking for going out. I mean, we now know that Luke Cowan-Dickey and Jack Noel and that, they're all going to be off making a few quid, and good luck to them. As indeed, we may see a couple of our players go off and make a few quid, especially depending on what happens with Steve Borthwick in the Six Nations and who he picks. But yeah, I'm a bit worried about the 31st. I mean, Mark McCall said it in his interview after the Irish game, didn't he? He said, sometimes it's good to get a defeat because then you learn and you know, it's how you come back from that. And, it's good to get a reset. We're at home to Chiefs. You're looking at doing a double over, and it's a team that all the fans want to see us win. But yeah, we're down to our bare bones, aren't we? And it's going to be a real big, difficult game, particularly given that Chiefs seem to have a full squad with no injury worries whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, we touched on this at the beginning of the season, of course. We have gone for a smaller squad to mean that we can keep some of the bigger names, I think, and fit them under the cap. Whereas as Exeter at the moment are still pretty much on that full strength squad, and where we're a bit short and they're coming into form. Yeah, it's going to be a tricky game. It always is against the Chiefs because they could be in an awful run of form and they would lift up their game against us because they don't seem to like us very much, surprisingly why. But yeah, it will be a tricky game. Be interesting to see if Jack Noel plays. He always used to say that he wouldn't play on the artificial pitches, but certainly not on ours. But he seems to have given up with that idea now and had a religious conversion. But you mentioned Henry Slade. He is in some form at the moment. He's virtually unplayable. Great player, always has been, but always been a little bit in and out for me. But at the moment, he is just running very, very hot. We're going to need to be on the top of our game, and we're going to need to get some of those 50-50 decisions and some of the other things. If we get a little bit of luck, then I think we can probably hold them off. But if we don't get a little bit of luck at some point during the game, then it could be a long afternoon for us.
Absolutely, it could be. As I say, perhaps it will be good that as supporters that we're going in with a less high level of expectation, because I think that's been part of this year as well. That London Irish result, we're all sat there thinking we just have to turn up. And, we've had as much an eye-opener as perhaps the players and the coaching staff have. So, perhaps we go in with a bit more humility and a bit more realistic expectations, and then perhaps we'll be surprised. I mean, that's certainly what we're hoping for. The good thing is, as my dad pointed out yesterday when I was around my mum and dad's for Boxing Day lunch, with that bubble and squeak and everything, as you do. But he did point out the good thing is that we got that cushion, that 10-point cushion that, with results that went our way as well, we lost, but others around us lost, like Sale lost as well. There wasn't as disastrous a result. So with that buffer, I think we can afford to ride our luck a little bit with injured players and whatever, and not lose our position in the league and still guarantee ourselves, a playoff position at the end of the season. Obviously, you're going to have Six Nations coming up as well, where we're presumably going to lose a few players. That's going to cause a problem, and there's always a chance of even more injuries. And if you're down to the bare bones and you then start losing injuries and, can Roddy Shagan play second row?
I'll tell you what, the thing I really like about him, and this has always been a thing from my rugby watching days, is I like a winger who likes to tackle. I hate to see wingers doing everything they can not to tackle the ball carriers. They get on the wrong side, they run around, they back off, they hope someone else comes to their rescue, as it were. Not Rossi, he just wants to tackle. Yeah, fair dues. He's a good lad like that, isn't he? So it would be good to see some of those players back as well. Oh, Barry, time to wrap up, I think.
I'll say thank you ever so much for your time this morning. I'll let you get back to your quality street and your big purple one or whatever is your next choice. I've got some vegan chocolate downstairs to tuck into and a few Guinnesses, and I think today might be bison grass vodka today. So that's all to look forward to and everything. So thank you for your time. Thank you to everybody else on the Fezcast who's contributed this year so far. Sam, Joe, John and Matt. And of course, thank you to everybody who's listened in. Thank you to everybody at Saracens for their support and what they've done to help us this year. And we'll look forward to seeing you. Our next show will be going, our New Year's show will be going out on the 4th of January, 2023. My word, where does the time go to, Barry?
I have no idea. It seems like only 5 minutes ago we were starting the season and worrying whether we were going to win at Harlequins.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks a lot, Barry. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Christmas, what's left of it, and we wish you from the Fezcast, all our friends, family, and followers, a very happy and prosperous New Year with hopefully a fine victory over Chiefs on Saturday to enjoy.
Well, that would be nice. Thanks all for listening, and we'll catch you again the other side of Hogmanay.
Indeed. Ta-ra then.
Ta-ra.
This is the Fezcast.